The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Flight 982 lifted off from Sao Paulo, heading toward Lima. Inside the cabin, everything felt ordinary. The hum of engines, the faint chatter of passengers, the scent of coffee drifting through the aisles. Among them sat a quiet 19-year-old girl named Elena, her eyes pressed against the window, watching the clouds drift like slow waves of peace. She had never been afraid of flying. To her, the sky was freedom, endless, pure, and safe. But fate was about to rewrite everything she believed about safety, about hope, about survival. At 32,000 feet, the plane entered a thick wall of clouds. The seatbelt sign blinked on. A few passengers shifted nervously, clutching armrests as the turbulence began to rattle the cabin. Elena closed her eyes, breathing deeply, whispering silent prayers in her heart. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm but strained. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some unexpected weather." Then static, then silence. Outside, the sky turned from white to gray and gray to violent black. Within seconds, lightning slashed across the clouds, striking the left wing. A flash, a blinding burst of light, and the world flipped upside down. The aircraft shuddered violently. Overhead bins burst open. Luggage hurled through the air like missiles. People screamed, but their voices drowned in the roar of tearing metal. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then nothing but silence. A silence so heavy it felt like time itself had stopped. In that silence, the plane began to fall. Elena's seatbelt strained against her chest as gravity tore at her body. Through the shattered window, she saw glimpses of jungle, endless green rushing upward like an ocean made of leaves. Her heartbeat synced with the sound of descent. Faster, faster, faster. The last thing she saw before everything went black was a single white bird, gliding effortlessly beside the falling aircraft, as if mocking gravity itself. And then, impact. Darkness swallowed everything. When Elena opened her eyes again, there was only silence. No screams, no engines, no sound of help coming. Just rain, steady, cold, and endless. She was still strapped to her seat, but the world around her was unrecognizable. The fuselage had torn apart. Pieces of metal scattered across a jungle so thick it seemed alive. Steam rose from the wreckage. Smoke curled into the mist, and everywhere she looked, destruction. Her hands trembled as she unbuckled the seatbelt. Her ears rang, her vision blurred, her body bruised beyond feeling. She tried to call out, but her voice broke into a whisper that the forest swallowed whole. Step by step, she crawled from the wreckage, barefoot, bloodied, dazed. Her left arm hung limp. The air smelled of gasoline and wet earth. The cries she hoped to hear, any voice, any sound of another survivor, never came. She was alone, completely alone, but she walked. In front of her stretched the Amazon jungle, vast, humid, and merciless. Every direction looked the same. The only sign of civilization lay behind her, twisted metal and fire. Elena stood there for a long time, rain running down her face like tears she hadn't yet cried. She could have waited for rescue. She could have stayed near the wreck, but something deep inside whispered, "Move." The sun burned by day and vanished by afternoon, leaving her trapped in an endless wall of darkness where insects screamed louder than thunder. She had no flashlight, no food, no map, just instinct and a strange calmness that came from shock. When thirst hit, she drank from a muddy puddle. When hunger came, she chewed on wild leaves. When fear whispered she wouldn't make it, she kept moving anyway. That night, lightning flickered above the trees, and not far away, but right above her. The crash site glowed faintly in the distance, smoke still rising like a dying memory. She thought of her mother's voice, of home, of the people who might be looking for her, and then she realized no one knew she was alive. She wrapped herself in a piece of torn insulation lying against a fallen log. Her body shivered uncontrollably. Raindrops fell through the leaves, landing softly on her face. Somewhere nearby, a jaguar growled, low and deep, like the earth itself had spoken. Elena didn't sleep that night. She just watched the sky between the branches, waiting for dawn, waiting for any sign that she wasn't forgotten. When the morning came, she stood up again. Her legs were weak. Her wounds burned. But she kept walking. For every step she took, The jungle seemed to close tighter around her. Vines clung to her clothes, branches tore her skin, insects bit her relentlessly. But there was one thing the jungle couldn't take her will to survive. Because somewhere deep inside, she believed, if I survive the fall, I can survive the rest. And as the second day began, with no food, no direction, and no human voice for miles, Elena disappeared into the heart of the Amazon, where every tree looked the same, and every sound could mean life or death. She didn't know it yet. But this was only the beginning of a 10-day journey that would test every limit of the human spirit, because somewhere beyond the green maze was life and hope. So she started walking. The first few hours were pure confusion. The jungle floor was a chaos of roots, mud, and silence. Every sound, a rustle, a crack, a drop, felt like a threat. Her clothes were torn, her shoes gone, her body shaking with exhaustion. The second morning came without sunlight. Only a dull gray haze hung between the trees, heavy with mist and the smell of wet soil. Elena opened her eyes slowly, her body stiff and aching. Every bone protested as she tried to move. Her clothes were soaked from the night's rain, her skin marked with bruises and insect bites. She was alive, but barely. The jungle didn't care who she was or what she had survived. It simply watched her silently like a living creature with 1,000 eyes. Every sound, a crack of branches, a drop of water, a distant animal's cry, and carried the weight of fear. But she pushed forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her legs trembled, her stomach twisted with hunger, and her throat burned for water. The small puddles she found were muddy, tinted green, filled with life that didn't belong in a human body. But she drank anyway. Because thirst was louder than reason. The deeper she walked, the thicker the air became. Vines brushed her face like fingers. The ground seemed to move beneath her, crawling with insects that clung to her skin. Somewhere in the distance, a monkey screamed, and then silence returned like a curse. Hours passed. Or maybe days. Time didn't exist in the jungle. Only the rhythm of survival. By the third day, Elena's body was covered in scratches. Her lips were cracked, her feet blistered and bleeding. Every step left a small trace of red behind her, the forest marking her path like a cruel trail. She stumbled upon a small stream, clear and alive with silver fish. For the first time, she smiled weakly. She cupped her hands, drank deeply, and washed her wounds. The cold water stung like fire but gave her strength again. She looked at her reflection, pale, hollow-eyed, and lost, a stranger staring back. Then something behind her moved. A faint rustle, a shadow shifting. She turned, breath caught in her throat. Nothing. Only leaves swaying in rhythm with the wind. But the feeling lingered. She was not alone. She started walking faster. Every sound became a threat. Every whisper of the jungle carried a voice she couldn't name. The sun was setting again, orange and gold bleeding through the trees, and soon the light vanished completely. Night fell like a curtain. The darkness here wasn't ordinary. It was alive, filled with sounds that had no shape or direction. Birds cried from above, insects screamed from below, and the forest pulsed with unseen movement. Elena huddled beneath a tree trunk, wrapping herself in torn fabric she'd carried from the wreck. Sleep never came easily, not here. Every time her eyes closed, the sound of the crash replayed in her mind. The fall, the fire, the silence. Sometimes she heard voices calling her name. But when she opened her eyes, there was only the endless dark. On the fourth day, she began to lose sense of direction. Her watch had stopped. Her sense of north and south meant nothing in a world that looked the same in every direction. She followed the sun, or what she thought was the sun, through narrow gaps between the trees. Sometimes the forest opened slightly, revealing sky, vast, blue, and mocking her smallness. And then it closed again, swallowing her whole. Her hunger grew unbearable. She chewed leaves, gnawed on soft roots, even tried to eat a small fruit that made her stomach twist in pain. But she kept moving, because stopping meant dying. By now, the forest floor felt endless. Her shoes had dissolved into shreds, her bare feet bruised and swollen. She used a sharp stick to help her walk. Every branch she pushed aside felt like the same one she had pushed an hour ago. That night, she found a small clearing and collapsed. Her body refused to move another inch. The stars above, peeked faintly through the gaps in the canopy. Her only proof the world above still existed. As she lay there, half-conscious, something strange began to happen. The forest began to whisper. Not with words, but with rhythm. The rustling leaves seemed to move in patterns, like waves carrying a secret message. The wind shifted direction, circling around her. Somewhere far away, a low hum echoed, deep, constant, almost human. She couldn't tell if it was real, or her mind slipping into delirium. Her breath quickened. Her vision blurred. Shapes moved in the shadows, faces she thought she recognized. Arms reaching, eyes watching. She tried to close her eyes. But the whispers grew louder, turning into a strange harmony of voices, like the jungle itself was alive, telling her something she couldn't understand. Then comes silence. A shooting star streaked across the patch of sky above her, and in that brief light, she thought she saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, a man watching her. But when she blinked, he was gone. She was hallucinating now, she knew that. Dehydration, exhaustion, fear, all twisting her senses into ghosts. When the morning came, Elena woke with a start. Her heart raced, her throat dry, her skin burning under the early sun. But something had changed. She no longer felt lost. Somehow deep inside, she felt pulled in one direction, a strange instinct guiding her through the maze of trees. She followed it, limping, staggering, barely able to breathe. And for the first time since the crash, she saw hope. A faint trail of footprints, old, half erased by rain, but human. Her heart skipped. Someone else had been here, maybe days ago, maybe weeks. But someone had survived this place before. She followed the trail, her pace quickening despite the pain, her heartbeat echoing louder than the jungle's whispers. Each step was a promise. You will not die here. And as she moved deeper into the heart of the Amazon, unaware that a storm was gathering again over the horizon, the jungle began to shift once more, the light changing, the silence thickening, as if it was preparing to test her all over again. The day began with silence, the kind that warns of something coming. The air was heavy, unmoving. Even the insects had stopped singing. Elena's steps echoed softly on the damp earth as she followed the faint trail of footprints she had found. Every few minutes she looked back, half expecting them to vanish, to be nothing more than a trick of her exhausted mind. The jungle had started to change. The trees grew taller, their roots thicker and tangled like veins beneath the soil. The air smelled different now, metallic, almost electric. Something was building above. By noon, the sky darkened to a shade of deep gray. The first drop of rain fell on her hand, warm, heavy, and slow. Then another. Within minutes, the heavens opened. The storm hit like an explosion. Winds howled through the jungle, tearing leaves and branches from above. Thunder cracked across the sky like the memory of the crash, deafening and merciless. Rain poured in sheets, soaking her clothes, blurring her vision. Lightning flashed again and again, lighting the forest in quick bursts of ghostly white. She tried to find shelter beneath a fallen trunk, but the ground beneath her feet turned to mud, swallowing her steps. Her stick slipped from her hands and she fell, face first, into the dirt. Water filled her mouth, her nose. She choked, coughed, gasped for air. The jungle seemed alive now, breathing with fury. She crawled forward, her arms trembling, hair plastered to her face. Every sound blended into chaos: thunder, wind, the crashing of branches. She screamed, but the storm swallowed her voice whole. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. She didn't know anymore. When the thunder began to fade, she realized the jungle was no longer just noise. It was whispering again. The wind seemed to carry voices, fragments of words she couldn't understand. She froze, pressing her hands to her ears, but the voices only grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, a child was laughing, then crying. She looked up, her heart pounding. Through the rain and fog, she saw movement, silhouettes between the trees. Men, women, shapes of people walking slowly, almost floating, the same faces she had seen on the plain. Her heart stopped. They were there, the passengers, soaking wet, silent, their eyes empty, walking in a line deeper into the forest. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She stumbled forward, reaching out, but her fingers met nothing, only air. The figures faded like smoke. She collapsed to her knees, sobbing, the rain mixing with her tears. She wasn't sure what was real anymore. Maybe the jungle wasn't trying to kill her. Maybe it was showing her what was already gone. That night, she found a hollow in the base of a massive tree. She crawled inside, shaking uncontrollably, wrapping herself in what remained of her jacket. The wind howled outside like a beast searching for her. Inside, the darkness wrapped around her like a blanket, suffocating, yet somehow safe. Her mind began to drift again. She saw her mother's face, not as memory, but clear and near as if she were right there whispering. Her voice was calm, telling her to rest, to sleep, to let go. Elena closed her eyes, too weak to resist. She froze. Through the curtain of rain, two glowing eyes stared back at her, yellow, unblinking. Predator eyes. She held her breath, every muscle locked in terror. The creature stepped closer. A jaguar, sleek and silent. Its fur shining wet under the flashes of lightning. It sniffed the air, growled again, and took another step forward. Elena didn't move, didn't breathe. The storm outside raged, thunder rolling like drums, lightning lighting the forest white. For a moment, predator and prey stared at each other, both wild, both trapped in the same nightmare. But then as a sound, a low growl from just beyond the entrance of the hollow. Her eyes snapped open. Then, as if satisfied she wasn't a threat, the jaguar turned and vanished into the storm. The jungle swallowed it whole once more. Elena exhaled shakily, her heart pounding like thunder inside her chest. She pressed her forehead against the damp earth, whispering inside her mind, "Thank you, thank you." By morning, the storm was gone. The forest glistened with droplets, every leaf shining like glass. Mist hung over the ground, soft and white, wrapping everything in silence. But something inside Elena had changed. The storm hadn't just broken her body, it had broken something in her mind, too. She could no longer tell what was real. The boundaries between dream and waking life had blurred. Sometimes she thought she saw the plane again, burning in the distance. Sometimes she saw her classmates, smiling, waving her forward. But every time she blinked, gone. She started to talk to herself. Not out loud, but in whispers. To keep her mind from dissolving completely into the jungle's endless rhythm. To remind herself she was still human, still alive. The trail of footprints she'd followed had disappeared overnight, washed away by the rain. But she didn't stop. She had nothing left except motion. Her wounds were infected now. Her lips were blue, her nails dark. Every step hurt like fire, but she kept going, one breath at a time. Sometimes she thought she could hear the faint hum of engines above, a rescue plane. But when she looked up, there was only sky. She reached a hill at sunset, a rare clearing with a view that stretched for miles. Golden light spilled over the jungle canopy, turning everything orange and alive. For a moment, she just stood there, trembling, watching the beauty of a world that wanted to kill her. And for the first time, she smiled. Not out of hope, but surrender. As darkness fell again, she found shelter beneath a large stone ledge. Her body was failing, her mind slipping in and out of dreams. She thought she saw the outlines of a small hut in the distance, wooden walls, smoke rising, a light flickering inside. She blinked, forcing her eyes open. It was still there. Maybe real, maybe not, but she had no choice. With her last strength, she stood and began to move toward it. Every step slower than the last, until the forest swallowed her once more. The jungle had broken her body, tested her will, and fractured her mind. But it hadn't taken her spirit. Not yet. The jungle was quiet again. The storm had washed away the chaos, leaving behind a strange stillness, the kind that feels like the world holding its breath. Every leaf dripped with rainwater. Every shadow shimmered faintly under the morning sun. Elena stood at the edge of a hill, staring at the faint image of a wooden hut far ahead. Smoke curled lazily from its roof, disappearing into the mist. Her vision blurred, her knees weak. But the sight pulled her forward like gravity itself. Her heart whispered, maybe this is real. Each step toward the hut felt heavier than the one before. The ground was slippery and uneven, roots twisting beneath her bare feet. Her body screamed to stop. Her wounds were open, her muscles torn, her head burning with fever. But her mind had found something stronger than pain. the belief that someone, somewhere might still be alive. Hours passed as she crawled, stumbled, and fell again and again. The jungle around her grew quieter the closer she came to the clearing, as if it too was watching. Birds perched silently, monkeys hung still from the branches. Even the wind had paused. When she finally reached the edge of the clearing, she stopped. The hut was smaller than it had seemed, made of rough wood and palm leaves. Half collapsed, almost blending into the forest itself. A wooden door swayed slightly in the breeze, creaking softly. She hesitated, heart pounding. Was it real, or just another illusion? Her vision flickered again. She blinked, and for a moment the hut disappeared. Only jungle. Then she blinked once more, and it returned. Her breath caught. This was it, the border between life and death, dream and reality. She took one last step. Inside, the air was dry and warm. The faint smell of smoke and ash filled the room. On the floor, there were signs of life: a tin cup, a rusted knife, a bed made of leaves. Someone had lived here recently. She collapsed beside the bed, trembling. Her entire body gave up at once, surrendering to exhaustion. For the first time in 10 days, she felt safe enough to close her eyes. She didn't know how long she slept. Hours, maybe days. When she woke again, sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the wall. Her fever had broken, and somewhere nearby she heard a sound. Footsteps. Slow, cautious, approaching the hut. Her heart raced. She tried to sit up, but her body was too weak. The door creaked open. A man stood there, weathered skin, gray beard, eyes wide with shock. He stared at her as if seeing a ghost. Then, without a word, he rushed forward, wrapping her in a blanket, offering her water. It was real. He was real. Tears welled in her eyes as she drank, the cool water burning her throat like fire. The man spoke softly, words she couldn't understand, but his tone was kind. He pointed toward the forest edge, and she saw a small dirt path winding away, sunlight spilling across it, the path to civilization. Days later, she was found by a rescue team, 2 locals and a helicopter circling overhead. The signal fire the man had built beside the hut had drawn their attention. When they lifted her onto the stretcher, Elena could barely keep her eyes open. Below her, the jungle stretched endlessly, green, alive, and mysterious. It looked almost peaceful from above, as if it hadn't tried to consume her. But she knew better. The jungle wasn't evil. It simply tested everything: the body, the mind, and the will to survive. And she had passed. Weeks later, lying in a hospital bed, Elena finally looked human again. Her skin was clean, her hair washed, her hands no longer shaking. But inside, she was changed forever. Reporters came and went, doctors called her a miracle. People sent letters and prayers, but none of them understood. She didn't survive because she was strong. She survived because the jungle allowed her to. Sometimes at night, she closed her eyes and still heard the whispers, the rhythm of wind through trees, the call of the storm, the low hum of something ancient and alive. It no longer frightened her. It reminded her of what it meant to truly live, to be nothing and yet keep walking. Months later, she returned, not to the same place, but to the edge of the Amazon. She stood beneath the trees once again, breathing in the thick, humid air. The sounds of birds and distant thunder filled her ears, and she smiled. Not because she conquered the jungle, but because it had shown her something no human world ever could. How fragile life is, and how powerful it becomes when it refuses to give up. She dropped a small silver bracelet into the soil, the only thing she had kept from the crash, and whispered softly a thank you that only the forest could hear. Then she turned away, the sun breaking through the clouds behind her, lighting her path home.